All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into how AI-powered drones are completely rewriting the rules of warfare. We're going to break down a major new report that looks at the technology, the global power struggle it's creating, and the massive questions we all need to start answering, and fast. To really get a sense of how big a deal this is, you just have to look at this quote. Austria's foreign minister is calling this the Oppenheimer moment of our generation. Think about that. That's not just some casual comparison. It's meant to tell us that we're not just talking about a new gadget, we're talking about a fundamental shift in the world, one with some really heavy ethical weight attached. So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start by figuring out what autonomous even means in this context. Then we'll look at how this tech is already showing up on the battlefield. After that, we'll zoom out and see how it's shaking up global security. And finally, we'll get into the frantic race to put some rules in place. Okay, first things first. We hear terms like killer robots thrown around all the time, but what are we actually talking about here? It's important to get the language right, so let's get a clear definition. The U.S. Department of Defense gives us a pretty solid starting point with its definition of an autonomous weapon system, or AWS. The key phrase here is without further intervention by an operator. This means the machine, once it's turned on and let loose, is the one making the final decision to pull the trigger, so to speak. And this right here, this is probably the most crucial distinction in this whole conversation. It's a spectrum, right? On one end, you have AI-assisted systems. Think of this like the AI is a co-pilot. It suggests a course of action, it points at a target, but a human is still in the loop and makes that final call. But on the other end, you have AI autonomous systems. This is where the human is out of the loop. The machine gets its orders and then it's on its own to find and engage a target based on its programming. That difference is everything. And look, this isn't some far-off sci-fi future we're talking about. This technology is being put through its paces right now, in the middle of real wars. So let's look at where all this theory is crashing into a very harsh reality. And the first place we have to look is Ukraine. This conflict has turned into what many are calling a live laboratory for drone warfare. We're seeing innovation happening at a speed that is just breathtaking. New tactics, new defenses, they're not developing over years, they're developing over weeks. And the sheer scale of it is just wow. Ukraine has gone all in on these cheap, fast FPV drones. But here's the real game changer, the data. They have this system called OCHI that has vacuumed up over 2 million hours of battlefield footage from over 15,000 drone crews. That footage is gold. It's being used to train the next generation of AI to spot targets automatically, making everything faster and smarter. Okay, now we're going to pivot to another case study that the report dives into, this one focusing on the war in Gaza and the reported use of AI-powered targeting systems. Now, according to the source for this explainer, which cites an investigation by Plus 972 magazine and Local Call, the Israeli military has been using several AI systems. One is reportedly called Lavender, and it's said to have flagged about 37,000 people as potential targets. Another one, the Gospel, identified buildings and structures. The report also notes that the Lavender system had a known error rate of around 10%, and that in some instances, a human's review of a target suggested by the AI took less than 20 seconds. So what happens on these battlefields isn't just staying on these battlefields. It's sending shockwaves across the globe, kickstarting a fierce competition that's changing the very nature of international security. And that brings us to what's being called a new kind of arms race. But this isn't the Cold War. We're not talking about counting nuclear warheads. This time, the race is for dominance in military artificial intelligence. And the two countries out in front setting the pace for everyone else are the United States and China. And this chart, just look at these numbers. It puts that race into brutally clear perspective. China has committed a staggering $150 billion to military AI. To give you some context, that is more than 30 times what the United States has publicly committed. That gap alone tells you everything you need to know about how seriously this is being taken. So how is the U.S. supposed to respond to that? Well, there's a new strategy called the Replicator Initiative, and the core idea is pretty simple. You can't match China's numbers, their sheer mass of ships, planes, and people, so you counter it with technology. The plan is to flood the zone with thousands of small, cheap, autonomous systems. Think drone swarms, and to do it within the next couple of years. The goal, in the words of one official, is to create a hellscape to deter any potential invasion of Taiwan. So if the US and China are in this high-speed race, it raises a huge question for an alliance like NATO. How do you get over 30 different countries all with their own priorities and budgets, to get on the same page and adapt to this new world together. Well, back in 2021, NATO did lay out an official AI strategy. The goals all sound great, right? Stay ahead on tech, make sure everyone's systems can talk to each other, and create rules for responsible use, things like lawfulness and accountability. But, and this is a big but, the report highlights a major problem. NATO still doesn't have a unified playbook for how to actually use drones in a real fight, and that's a massive gap between a strategy on paper and what happens on the ground. And this all brings us to the final, and maybe the most important question. As this technology spreads like wildfire, can the international community actually agree on a set of rules before things get completely out of hand? This timeline really tells the story, and honestly, it's a story of moving at a snail's pace while the tech moves at light speed. The first major alarm bells were rung way back in 2012. Since then, well, we've had UN expert groups, some principles that nobody has to follow, and then finally, in 2023, the very first UN resolution on the topic. That's more than 10 years of talking. So why is this so hard? Well, the roadblocks are pretty fundamental. For starters, countries can't even agree on a basic definition of what an autonomous weapon is. They can't agree on what meaningful human control actually means in practice. And underneath all of that, you've got geopolitical tension and a deep-seated fear that if you hit the brakes on development, your rival is just going to fly right past you. But the clock is absolutely ticking, and the pressure is seriously ramping up. The UN Secretary General and the International Committee of the Red Cross have basically joined forces and issued this urgent call to action. They are demanding that countries hammer out new, legally binding rules with real prohibitions and restrictions by 2026. It's an attempt to finally draw a line in the sand. And that leaves us right here with the question that hangs over everything. As these weapons multiply, and as the speed of combat gets faster than any human can possibly react, what does meaningful human control even look like? Is that a principle we can actually hang on to? Or is it just a nice idea that technology is about to leave in the dust? It's the central problem of this whole new era.